Okay, welcome guys. So this is going to be a walkthrough of the Health and Social Care Unit 1 exam paper as requested by a few of you over the last couple of days. As I say, I'm going to walk through the paper. I'm going to look at some of the questions with you. I'll talk about some of the answers and we'll try and cover the whole length of the paper. I'm not going to write my answers out in full. As you see, I've got a Word document open over here so I can write my answers out for you. But I'm not going to write them in full. It's more if I have any notes or any points I want to add or write in, I will put them on the screen just so you can see as I'm talking through. But as I say, I'm going to go through the paper sort of and hopefully make you feel a little bit more comfortable, particularly those of you who at this point will be sitting it tomorrow. Now, this is the January 2020 exam paper. So it's an old paper. It's from this time last year that I've obviously got access to. So I'm going to talk through. I don't know what's on the exam tomorrow, just in case anyone asks. I don't write for the exam board or anything like that. Literally just teach the materials. But here is an exam paper that obviously from the past series that I thought we can take a look at together. As it is one of the more recent papers, the template, the structure, the layout should be fairly consistent with what you may be facing with your exam. So let's take a look. Let's have a go at this. So very first page on the left here is what the exam paper front cover will look like. You'll put your centre number, your name, surnames, all that material on there. You don't need anything for this. Make sure you've got a black pen, as it says on the front, and a biro pen, ideally, or a couple of biro pens. I would also say you can take a highlighter if you want to highlight the items or any questions, so you're making sure you're answering them, but you don't need to do that. And again, what will happen is obviously the highlighting, you know, is for your benefit as opposed to the examiner's. So make sure you've answered each question. 90 marks, 90 minutes, minute per mark. So let's take a look at these questions. So the first one here, we've got a graph, as we tend to have with these bar graph questions. It says the average mean of mothers at childbirth in England and Wales in 2016 by child number. And the first question, it says here 1A, average age of mothers at the age of birth for their first child, we can see is 28.8. That's what the graph tells us. Second question, so 1A2, the difference between age in mothers at the birth of their second and third child. Well, you look at the graph, the second child is born at 30.9 years of age, third child 31.9 years of age. So the difference is 1 year. Oh, obviously, as I do, I will make typos, I may misspell things, so just be wary of that. Okay, there we go. Nice, easy. 2 minutes. We move on to the second set of questions. So this is the 1B questions. So we've got Sarah and Timothy are parents of Joshua, who is 3 years old, same age as my little boy. Sarah is pregnant and she and Timothy are looking forward to the birth of their second child. Actually, strangely, same situation I'm in. Joshua is currently in the stage of early childhood. So as he's at the age of 3, he's in early childhood or childhood. Identify in the correct order the 4 life stages that will follow from early childhood. So the next stage would be adolescence. That's the next stage after childhood. After adolescence, you hit early. Again, typo there, adulthood. After early adulthood, you have middle adulthood, and then later adulthood. Now, we just have to identify the correct order, so that's our order there. We don't need to put the age ranges because the question isn't asking us to do that. But if we were, it would be, obviously for adolescence, it's 9 to 18. Early adulthood is what we put as 19 to oh, I've lost it now. 40. I want to say 44. Middle adulthood is 46, 65, and later adulthood is 65 plus. Obviously, I'm doing it off the top of my head. I haven't revised that a little bit. I would double check it, but I suspect I'm fairly confident these are the age ranges. It's only that middle adulthood and early adulthood overlap. I can't remember if it's 44 and 45 or 45 and 46. I'm going to gamble and say 44 to 45. Right, there we have it. So that's our first question there. And then it says, this concepts of growth and development. So obviously this is 1C. So growth is an increase in height, weight, mass as the body physically changes, and then growth rates vary across life stages. Development would be, this is the gaining or improvement of skills, generally following milestone or developmental milestones, e.g. gross motor skills before fine motor skills. Now, again, with these questions, if you're ever unsure, I mean, like my developmental definition, gain or improvement skills and milestones, I don't know if that would be enough. So if you're ever unsure, throw in an example, never hurts. Same with the growth rate, it could be various. So obviously, again, height, weight, mass is what growth is. I'm not sure whether that would be enough for 2 marks. That's why I've just thrown in this extra bit about how it varies across the life stages, just to be safe. I think that's always the best thing. If you're ever unsure, write a little bit more. Okay, so let's move on to 1D. So 1D, it is explain the difference between gross and fine motor skills. Well, we've kind of already touched that. So gross motor skills involve the movement of larger muscle groups, such as limbs, and are needed for walking, jumping, running. So we've got some gross motor skills needed, whereas fine motor skills are smaller muscles performing more precise movements, such as, or e.g. grasping, holding, manipulating. As I say, if you're ever unsure, throw in some examples to demonstrate what you are talking about. Okay, there we go. So that's 1D done. And then we've got to move on to 1E. So again, some of these long questions, I'm not going to write a full answer, just some notes. So discuss how Piaget's model may explain explain children's development of schemas. Now, Piaget's model is the schemas model. So there's the idea that obviously it's new information is processed and stored in a child's mind, helps to understand the world. It's part of cognitive development. And obviously the process, obviously new information presented to the child. Obviously what will then happen, because that new information has come in, is that the children will take that on board. So it's a case of learning the new information. I'm just quickly double checking again, because I'm showing through this with you and I haven't revised this off the top of my head. I'm just quickly pulling up my answer sheet. There we go. So the key words, we have equilibrium. And as I say, I probably should have done some revision on this beforehand. So equilibrium is the next step, where they obviously they acquire the new information. It's actually, I'm going to come back. So it's comparing new information to existing schema. Does it fit? So it might be like, if we're looking at a new car, a child sees a red car. That's new information. Equilibrium is that that child has only seen red cars, or blue cars, sorry. Their dad has a blue car. They've only seen a blue car. So a red car doesn't fit with their existing knowledge set. So this is where we see disequilibrium. Let's spell it. So new information in conflict with existing info. So that's the disequilibrium stage. What will then happen is we have accommodation that follows. So the idea of existing information is updated and changed. So the child learns that new information is part of their mindset now. This will then lead to, or follows into, assimilation. Assimilation. So again, this is where the child now understands cars are red and blue. And then what would happen is, if then the child sees a yellow car, the whole process begins. Nuclear information, equilibrium, disequilibrium, accommodation, and then assimilation. And the process repeats. And again, this is how children learn the world around them. So again, this is basically, you just talk through this process and again emphasize these key concepts, obviously, that are part of Piaget's theory. Okay. Question 1F. So we're still talking about Josh and his family. 1F. So this is our first 10 marker here. So again, I'm not going to write the full 10 marker out, but we'll go through the key points, the key ideas that we could and should think about including. So this question is, Josh's parents work long hours. Josh is not at nursery. A childminder looks after him until his parents come home. Discuss how early attachment may impact on emotional and social development. So key things in that question, we've got early attachment. Key thing of this is Bowlby. So we want to make sure we're talking about Bowlby and his theory. Bowlby's theory, which I've talked about, Bowlby, I've talked about before, is about attachment with mother, essentially, his main one, the primary caregiver. That was who he focused on, and how that is important for future relationships, attachments, resilience, and again, a secure attachment in early childhood is key. And again, it was all about trying to show that the attachment to mother is more important for, obviously, emotional development. So it is all part of emotional development. So thinking about the question, we can just kind of come back to the idea that this would improve or allow secure, positive relationships and attachments in adult life. And the key thing that Bowlby found was that if you had good attachment as a child, you'd have good attachments with and relationships as an adult. So that's part of that question, Bowlby and attachment. You've got Ainsworth. Oh, I can't remember how to spell. Oh, my spelling is all over the place at the moment. So Ains. And again, it was the secure attachment and connections to parents. So again, that's a key point as well. Obviously, again, in terms of forming relationships, social factors, again, we can talk about how this is good for social development. So more resilient children with secure attachments, more likely to be confident and explore or meet new people. So again, in terms of social development, having secure attachment, good emotional connections is going to be key. You can always throw in as an evaluation, obviously discuss how early attachment. You've got Schaefer and Emerson. Again, it was about the multiple attachments. So children have multiple attachments. They don't. It isn't just about one secure attachment, but a whole range of them. As criticisms of Bowlby about it's only the mother. There's also been case studies of children who are neglected, forming secure attachments beyond early childhood. So again, the idea, just because you have a bad relationship as a child doesn't mean the rest of your relationships are going to be bad. So again, not answering the form, but just enough stuff there to help give you an idea of what to talk about. So we'll move on to the next set of questions. So we'll move this down to 2A. So we've got a new case study character here. So it's coming back to Sarah. Sarah is 41 years old. She did not expect to become pregnant at 41, but she's looking forward to the birth of her new child. Identify 2 predictable life events that may occur in early adulthood. So this might be marriage or relationship. It could be promotions or employment progression. Buying or renting a house. So these would be the things that you may see happen in early childhood. Having children. So again, these would be starting a family. Pregnancy does kind of this idea about obviously a predictable life event, particularly a planned pregnancy. But I'm slightly conscious because the item talks about Sarah being pregnant, I would be less inclined to write it just because it's already in that kind of little bit of context given to you. And then we've got 2B. So, describe 2 ways the perimenopause may affect Sarah. So the perimenopause is the later stages of early adulthood for women, where the menstruation and pregnancy and ovulation, all these kind of reproductive systems start to slow down. They haven't stopped because that's menopause when they stop. This is the slowing down. So hormonal changes could also, we're looking 2 ways it could affect her. So hormonal changes in the body as reproductive cycles change could cause mood swings. We could talk about hot flushes, night sweats. So these are all symptoms there. We could talk about slowing down of reproductive cycle, ovulation changes could cause irregular and inconsistent menstruation periods. We could menstruation, hormonal changes. It could be also look at the idea of loss of libido, drive due to hormonal changes, and obviously difficulties with sexual interaction. So there'll be symptoms such as due to symptoms such as forgotten how to spell symptoms such as vaginal dryness. So again, if you're ever unsure about a point like I've done here, put a third one in if you've got the space. I mean, obviously this question you kind of asked specifically for 2. but there's nothing to say, not that I'm suggesting you do, but if you were ever unsure, squeeze a third one in under down here, just in case. Like I say, I've put 2 hormonal ones, the night sweats, hot flushes, mood swings, sex drive, and obviously if I'm not sure about either of those, I could always put a third in. Okay, so that's the perimenopause or premenopause. So let's move on to our next question. So it's come back to Sarah. Sarah has Huntington's disease and is worried her children may also develop this disease. Describe the physical impact of 2 other conditions that may be inherited. So this is coming back to B1, B2 in the teaching material. So obviously, what question we're on 2C, aren't we? So obviously, Huntington's disease. Huntington's disease is a big no-no. Don't write about Huntington's disease because it's in the item. So we're not going to write about it. But other conditions that can be inherited, you've got muscular dystrophy. So that causes a weakening and decline in muscle growth / tissues and causes patients to lose movement or mobility. So that's one condition we can use. There's obviously a PKU. There is a long medical name, which I can't pronounce, I can't spell. So I would put PKU. I'd hope that PKU would be enough to accept it. That this is an inherited condition, and it's about the absorption, or body is unable to process and absorb amino acids, causing them to collect in body and particularly around the brain. And obviously this leads, amino acids, so I probably should say, from proteins. So obviously they would require medication as a result. Other conditions that we could talk about: cystic fibrosis, causes the lungs to be, not clear fluids, and as such fluid / mucus collects in lungs. Obviously this leads to breathing difficulties. So that could be again mucus. There are other, like Klinefelter's syndrome. Again, spelling, I would have to, oh, there we go, Klinefelter's syndrome. But I know that's to do with, it has some learning difficulties, which is not a physical disability or physical impact, but it does lead to lower testosterone, levels, result in, and obviously undeveloped or genitals in male. So again, men who have Klinefelter syndrome, their testes and genitals don't develop properly during puberty or fully because of low levels of testosterone and issues in the body. They have obviously likely to have learning difficulties. The obviously other hormones have an impact, so they're more likely to have have fatty deposits appear in different parts of the body. So it's kind of a one that's worth looking at. But as I say, it's a inherited condition. The only one I did look at the mark scheme for this, they talked about Down syndrome. And counted it as an inherited condition. Now, I'm unfamiliar with that. I mean, my understanding of Down syndrome is that Down syndrome is a sort of change, a mutation in the chromosomes of DNA. So it's a random condition. It's babies are born with it, but it isn't, as far as I'm aware, inherited. So the idea being that you could have two people with Down syndrome if they were to have a child. That doesn't necessarily mean their child is going to have Down syndrome. There may be higher percentages, higher risk factors, but it isn't passed down that way. So, as I say, it's considered an inherited. It's on the mark scheme, but personally, I would be a little bit unsure about using it. But as I say, I know it's a condition you're born with. It's a genetic condition, but it's not a inherited one, as far as my understanding of it would go. But as I say, I'm not an expert in it, and things may have changed. Right. And then we're on 2D. Time for this paper already. So we're on there for the next 10 marker. So Sarah's mum is increasingly unable to look after herself, may need to move into sheltered housing. Okay. To what extent? Remember that to what extent question. So we need to say how much of our evidence agrees with the question. To what extent is this correct and what is not, or how it's challenged? So to what extent does later adulthood lead to a decrease in social and physical activity? So we'll go with the agrees. So we know Henry and Cummings said this is their theory: social disengagement. So that's their idea. That's the theory you can put in. Physical activity. Now, again, we could talk about the biological change, the later adulthood. Again, excuse all these typos. So reduced mobility, health. We can talk about weakening of the body, immune system. We can talk about osteoporosis. That's going to be spelled wrong. Osteoporosis, and osteoarthritis. Again, my spelling is awful. As I say, I don't think, obviously, if you wrote the spelling slightly wrong, I imagine most examiners would know what you're saying. So this would all suggest less physical activity. So to the extent these would agree that to this extent people are less physically active. Socially, we might look at retirement, death of friends, family moving away equals less social activity. However, the opposite side, to what extent? So however, it's also worth noting that you've got Havig, Hurst and activity theory. You've got older people remaining healthy and active. In later adulthood. That would all be arguments that are going against this. Obviously, moving into a care home, going to be in more contact with similarly aged people, activities, new friendships. So again, it's to what extent does moving into a care home reduce social and activity theory? So yeah, we can go through weaker, less able to do stuff, isolated, that would show that, you know, to extent it does reduce social. However, on the other other hand, we've got the activity theory and all the people remaining active throughout. So again, slightly different. It's throwing in both sides of your debate. And then our next 10 marker, which is 2E. So to what extent can stress be positive for health and well-being? So Sarah has been promoted. She's struggling to manage her career and being a new mum. So main theory, we've got Holmes, Ray, social readjustment scale. Obviously, we can also throw in the predictable and unpredictable life events. And again, it's a to what extent. So we want to show that stress is positive. So we can talk about how it's a motivator for many people. It's that stress of getting stuff done. The stress builds up. You end up moving on and getting work complete. It encourages sort of quick thinking. It can be obviously organizing time. So again, for well-being, it can be quite good for motivating people to be organized. If you're stressed, response might be to get active to manage stress. So health-wise, to the extent that health positive factors, stress could be positive because it encourages people to maybe run or do activities to de-stress, or make time for calming activities, which is theirs. But however, we know the Holmes-Ray social readjustment scale, we'll just put HR, shows that higher stress equals more prone to illness. Stress equals poor health, bad diet, behavioral changes. So again, like eating bad foods, behavioral. We go close enough. Changes. So, you know, smoking, drinking, are encouraged when being stressed. Obviously, in this context, the source of the stress for Sarah is the baby. So, baby equals stress and tired. Job equals stress. So again, that idea about being active, as we said up here, if you've got a baby, you are not going to have time to be active. So again, it's all going to potentially go against it. So as I say, so to what extent? So positive can be, stress can be positive for health and well-being because this is there. However, to this extent, it's quite limited. In reality, stress is more likely to cause this, that, the other. So again, it's putting both sides in, but showing to what extent health is improved by stress. Okie dokie. So section 3. So what we got here, we have got describe 2 effects of physical changes that occur in later adulthood. So nice and easy one here. So reduction in height, so due to spinal disc compression, skin loses elasticity, causing wrinkles. Hair loses color pigment, causing graying of hair. You could talk about crystallization of fluid in inner ear, causing loss of balance or mobility. So with this question, two physical changes, we're looking for things that physically happen. And I think because it is a 4 marker, you want to make your point. Reduction in height, the skin losing elasticity, hair loses color pigment, and then the kind of extra bit. So spinal disc compression causes wrinkles, causes graying, crystallization of fluid in inner ear causes loss of mobility. So give 2 points per point. And again, try and keep it specific rather than just saying old people shrink, hair goes grey, people get wrinkly and horrible. You know, try and be specific in terms of your language and what's going on. We've got 3B. Oh, 3B. There we go. So discuss how moving into sheltered accommodation may affect an eater's self-concept. Now, this is very similar to, there was a question similar to this in the 2019 paper, and actually even the paper before that. So a lot of questions about how someone going into a care home would feel, and actually it was a 10 mark we just looked at not that long ago. So self-concept, so it's how people see self. So what we need to do is kind of come up with a couple of points really. So if you're put into sheltered accommodation, it says here that sad to leave her previous home, but has been mixing with new residents and has taken up hobbies. So the negative might be that feel worthless or bad, as no longer able to look after self. That could have a negative impact on self-concept. Reminder of getting old, possibly feel a burden on family. So again, negative image. However, new friends and activities could positively impact image, feeling welcomed and popular. So again, it's ultimately is how it might feel about their self-concept. So being able to complete new activities, making new friends, that could be positive for their self-image. Okay, so we're back to Sarah. Sarah's popped up again here. So we're on 3C, and they've got another 10 marker as we would have normally. So Sarah's responsible for many important clients in her job. She's now working some weekends as well as long hours during the week. Sarah's sister has been diagnosed with coronary heart disease. Sarah's worried that she may also develop coronary heart disease. So evaluate the stress diaphysis model and how it may be used to explain the importance of inherited characteristics for health and well-being. Now, the stress diaphysis model is a really good one, because essentially the idea being that if you are stressed, you are in a higher or increased position to develop illnesses and diseases. And this comes from sort of stress diaphysis. It kind of has a little bit of a link to things like Gesell, who talks about maturation theory. But yeah, stress diaphysis model. So essentially stress equals increased risk of illness. So essentially it's evaluate. So this is, we're going to agree, this is true. So we've got we can also bring in Gesell and maturation theory. So the idea that you are born with conditions, they might develop as you age, but sort of stress can sometimes be a trigger for them. So we've got Gesell. We can talk about hereditary conditions. So like the previous question we could talk about, so like the Huntington's, which can be passed down genes. Again, not always. You may carry the genetic predisposition, but not necessarily contract it. So again, there will be arguments that we could use to support it. We could also think about obviously the idea of increased susceptibility to diseases such as cancer. So there are arguments that we can use to support this. On the opposite side, you know, again, it's all about healthy lifestyle and social factors. So again, it's environmental factors. These are equally important. We know in her case, it's the stress could be a trigger. So diet, exercise, smoking, drinking could equally cause this condition. It doesn't necessarily mean it's an hereditary one. So again, they could be the evaluative points that again contribute to this discussion. Again, slightly less. There's not necessarily that many theories we could bring in, but again, it's the main point would be arguing that there are things that could be inherited and things that are not. Okay, what's this? 3D. 3 again, where's that gone? 3D. So, Sarah and Timothy, struggling relationship, getting a divorce. Josh is now 11, living with his dad. Josh is struggling to concentrate at school. To what extent might a dysfunctional family influence individual health and well-being? So, to what extent does it? So the family will have an impact. So we can talk about home life. Stress. So we can bring in some of these theories. We talked about the Holmes-Ray stress diaphysis model. Again, just because it was on the, I'm pretty sure that was in the previous question. Stress diaphysis model. We, you know, just because it's on the previous question doesn't mean we can't use it for this question. We can talk about conflict in the home, negative self-esteem, self-worth, self-concept. We can talk about attachment issues, bringing in Bowlby or Ainsworth, whoever we want to bring in there. So again, there's arguments we can look at that could support this, and that dysfunctional families may have a negative impact on self-worth and self-well-being. It's a harder question, this one. I know, again, on the opposite side, that divorce can have positive impacts. So escaped conflicting parents in the home. So again, because both parents are not living together, there's no more not raised or not around parental conflict. Again, it's kind of bored. It's sociology. It's not health, but in sociology, when I teach that to my classes, my sociology class, we talk about a theorist called Jenks, who says that divorced parents are more likely to see parenting as a sense or source of identity and try to be better parents. Again, it's not a health one necessarily, but I think it's quite worthwhile, could be one to include. Again, so it's both sides of the debate. You talk about all the pros and cons, and there's a few theories in there. Oh, there we have it, and that is the end of the paper. So a very, very rough walkthrough of things to do, things to say. Hopefully this might be helpful in some respects and giving you ideas. As I say, I'm not writing the full answers out just for time, but hopefully this helps and gives you something to think about in terms of the exam. If you're doing it tomorrow, good luck. All I can say at this point is, do any last bits of revision. Maybe think about some questions, think about some topics that could come up, and just take the questions as they come. Read the question, think about